The first order of business is to approve the agenda. The motion moved by Councillor Papp and seconded by Councillor Lane is that the agenda for July 21st, 2014 regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adopted. Any amendments? Councillor Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to just bring forward an issue so that we can deal with it at other P&P meetings, but I received a phone call and it is in regards to traffic calming. So if I could just add that there was a pretty good suggestion that was given to me, and I'd like to bring that forward for staff to investigate.
Thank you. So we will add that under new business.
Thank you.
And call it, what, 5.3? And it's traffic calming? This being committee, we don't need a seconder. So let me call the question with regard to changing amending the agenda. All in favor? That is passed. So 5.3 traffic calming. So to the agenda as amended, all in favor? And that is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item of business is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any councillors with a conflict of interest? None? None. That will be recorded. So moving on, under new business, 5.1, physician recruitment. It's moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Papp, that issue summary report physician and recruitment policy be received, and that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend that the physician recruitment policy be approved by Council. Let me just find it here. There we go. So, comments with respect to the item. Councillor Papp.
Full support of this. I just needed some clarification when we talk about incentive funding. I wasn't quite clear on what we meant by wage subsidies. Could someone explain that to me?
Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wage subsidies is the way that council currently funds physician recruitment. That is to say that they offer, $5,000, $7,500 a year in wage subsidy to a doctor while he's in the process of establishing a practice. So that's just one way that council can provide incentive.
No, I understand, but I guess the question is, it's just the term wage, because they bill OHIP. It's not really a wage. So as they establish practices, as all you know, they send in their billing. So if that's what it is to give them their cash flow, their income. So it's an income subsidy, more or less. Am I fair? I don't want to deliberate, but just when I saw the wage, I think it's not a wage. They're fee for service. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. That's clear. That's fine. That's all I need to know.
I think the words in that can be
income.
Yeah, you could. You know what I'm. You don't get it. I don't want it to mislead. Somebody reads this public. Are we subsidizing the wages of people that work for the doctors? The answer is no. We're actually, and you're right. Yeah, you're quite right, Mr. CEO. We're helping them get started up with their income as they start billings and start their practice. Right. That's what our practice has been.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Other councillors? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yeah, Councillor Papp, maybe we should change it to whether it's, what did you say?
I don't know, just something else.
Startup subsidies or
yeah, that's even better.
Income subsidy, the
Income.
for a short period of time is
Or
what
subsidies.
it is. And that's been
Income.
and that's been our practice, as the CEO indicated
been.
and Councillor Papp indicated. And I guess some of this comes out of discussions with the regional physician recruiter, and also and Councillor Durley and Councillor King and I also touring the DeGroote School, etc. So there's different options that different municipalities have. We've been sort of focused on the relocation expenses and the income subsidy part. So I am in favor of this as well, because it gives us more options. It was quite interesting, Mr. Chair, that I think council directed that staff develop a policy on physician recruitment back last year, and the reason was that there wasn't a policy. So it was done through bylaw, and in previous councils, there were more formal committees, et cetera. So it has evolved and changed through the years, but this policy would give a greater flexibility, let's say, depending on, as things move forward. So it does talk about medical equipment that might be owned by the municipality, and other municipalities do that, technologies. So I guess my only question would be, Mr. Chair, how would each of these be done? When we were talking about wage subsidy or relocation expenses, those were done through agreement. Does the CEO anticipate, or the treasurer anticipate, that the same thing would be done with these different items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The answer to the mayor's question is that this would be the policy. Council would still be required to pass a bylaw with whatever specific incentive was be given to a specific individual. So that process would still remain the same.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and being a member of this committee, this will give us an excellent foundation from which to negotiate with new docs coming in, and I like it. It's a great, really a great way to enter into discussions with folks to come in.
Thank you. Other comments from other councillors? I have one. The statement makes reference to varieties of actions that we can take, including capital and equipment, in addition to straight-out money. And just wondering how that fits with an individualized approach to individuals, physicians, when attempting to attract them, or are we contemplating the creation of offices for them to work out, having equipment purchased for them to work with, that sort of thing? Just perhaps you can describe a little of how that works.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The medical equipment is just that. The typical practice in this particular area is that the municipality would make a contribution or purchase a piece of equipment of which they would retain ownership. So if the physician was to leave, the equipment would remain the property of the town. The capital is capital contribution for building, construction, a new medical clinic, or some other facility. It could be a learning facility. And, it could be also technology to be installed in an existing medical facility that would facilitate telemedicine, for example, or learning and educational opportunities for student doctors.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments, questions? So to call the question, I beg your pardon? Councillor
No,
Pat?
I was just going to add, in my past experience too, you could have, if it's a municipal building, and you want to improve it to attract, and they've done this, the physical improvements to the municipal building, but include the capital construction to attract and establish a medical facility. So it's been done. It can be both public, private. So it works very effectively.
Mr. Mayor?
Just want to highlight something, so just for clarity. This doesn't mean we're going to do this, it doesn't mean, it's just opening the door to the possibility, and all of this has to come back to council for ratification and in the public. So I think that's important to know for folks that might be wondering, are they all of a sudden doing that? No, it just ensures that what other municipalities are doing and finding for their best practices, we now have the possibility of doing the same. We know, Mr. Chair, that family medicine is important, especially as medicine throughout Niagara changes. It's important to have local family docs, and I think, this helps, or could potentially help us attract and retain the types of docs that we want for our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments, questions? Call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Excuse me. The next item is moved by Councillor Papp and seconded by Councillor Lane, that the issue summary report, council appointments to boards, committees, and commissions be received, and that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend to council that the policy be approved and included in the town's policy manual as S201-18, and that committee provide feedback on the terms of reference for existing committees of council at the next regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee. Comments? Mayor.
I guess a couple of questions or comments. The first is, as I read the key fact here, looking at the, or key facts, looking at the committees, it says the committees play an important role in the corporate decision-making process, and they do, by providing a means for staff and council to receive the views and advice of citizens on a variety of matters. Through committees, residents of the town are able to have greater input on issues that affect them, certainly. And I was thinking, probably because I was reading this over the weekend, Mr. Chair, and we have Summerfest, and we have that specific committee that's more than providing their views, providing advice. They're hands-on-the-ground committee. Similarly, the Canada Day Committee are hands-on-the-ground committee, very, very actively involved. The Pelham Community Policing Committee, the Active Transportation Committee also steps up on various, at various times and in various roles. Is that do we have to add words to this? Or is that, when I think about the committees, do the committees fit into this idea of hands-on committees versus advice? So, again, for clarity, we just appointed a architectural design committee, or whatever we're going to call the committee in the future, a committee designing or helping to design. So they're not doing the design themselves, they're providing advice to us, just as we heard tonight from the firefighters, providing advice on what the design looks like. They're not doing it. So is this committee broad, or is this policy statement broad enough to address that?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The clerk has drafted this, and as council's aware, she's not away, but I will comment on her behalf and say that perhaps this should be expanded to include some wording around the delivery of services and functions, or something to that effect, just because there are committees who do service delivery, whether it be a festival or some other Supperfest or what have you. So I'll take that under advisement, and I'll make that revision, or have the clerk make that revision before it comes to council for approval.
Okay. Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Mayor?
I just had another couple of things. Maybe Councillor Durley's going to comment on this. The Heritage Committee, it says that this resolution is that we bring it back, all the committees, to our next P&P. And yet the Heritage Committee, we're awaiting, I think, a meeting and input from staff. Will this be sort of save and accept that committee, Mr. Chair?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that is correct, because council has already given direction for us to review the terms of reference.
I can give some clarification on that.
Councilor.
Meetings of that committee have been postponed until such time as staff is going to meet. The Director of Planning has made that perfectly clear. So once that mandate is there, then certainly we can go forward. But there is no plan for that committee to meet until such time as the action that we've directed takes place.
That's excellent. Thank you. I appreciate the clarity. And it is good to look at these. You look at the library agreement, Mr. Chair. I don't know if anybody else caught this. Members of the library committee, according to this, are members of the board are to be appointed annually. We don't do that. We appoint them for the term. So
For the term.
it's good to check on these things and follow through on them. Even just there's areas there about ex officio members on, I forget which committee it is, but there's supposed to be another member of council appointed to, I think the Summerfest committee is ex officio, or the downtown beautification is ex officio. So it's good that we look at these. What does staff foresee at our next meeting? We'll run through each of these. Is that what's being proposed, Mr. Chair, and kind of make suggestions on how to improve each of them?
Mr. CEO?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Councilor Pat?
And so I would presume through you, Mr. Chair, to the CEO as well, there's this My favorite is the promotional advisory group, of which I was supposed to be a member of. We never got going.
Right.
So I don't know, does it serve a purpose? And if it doesn't, then maybe it's one that we delete. Is that fair to say? I don't, Mr. Zia?
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Because we hired a professional, and maybe this is something we don't really need, right?
That's correct. Just by way of background, my understanding is that terms of reference are created as a response to a situation. So, in other words, there's a desire in the community for communities in bloom participation, so terms of reference is done in isolation for that particular function. The clerk and I would like to streamline the policy or the terms of reference so that they follow a similar format.
Right.
And that they're, that as new ones come online, they're not being developed in a vacuum, but they're being developed in a template that is similar to the existing terms that we have.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Durley.
Yes, I wanted to jump in, Mr. Chair, to when the mayor brought up the, first of all, some committees that are on the ground and some that aren't. Summerfest committee is just that. Heritage is an advisory committee. Another is an advisory committee. So I think the title of that gives you the function of it. If you're giving advice, that's different. If you're a committee, Canada Day is the Canada Day committee. They're not an advisory thing. They are on the ground. So I think basically by title of what that is, it gives us the actual formula as to what they do. And like to me, when I read that, I found that to be very understandable, knowing the way things work and knowing the difference between advisory and just a committee. So I think that that was clear, and I think staff was maybe taking that for granted, but to me, that was very clear.
Thank you. Thank you. If no other councillors have comments, I have one. We discussed in council earlier this evening drainage committees. And I think it was suggested that this would be a good time to raise the question. And so my view of this is that we ask staff to look at the issue of drainage committees and come back with a recommendation of their use, their purpose, suggested terms of reference, and we can work it from there. Any comments with regard to that, Councillor Pat?
No, I'm with you. It's understood that we as the committee would want to see that happen, not just your view, because we want to make sure that this becomes something that is seen as an integral part. Sometimes we each have our own sort of particular types of focuses, and that's one that when I heard tonight was we need to establish from what I gathered. So I concur.
Thank you very much.
Do
So that is-
you need a mover for that, Mr.
Do we-
Chair?
yeah, that's what I'm asking. I mean, do we need a motion? Councillor Papp moves, and we don't require a second because this is in committee. So the motion is that staff be directed to investigate drainage committees and to return with recommendations for use, purpose, terms of reference, other.
At the next PNP meeting.
At the next PNP meeting. All in favor? That is carried.
Mr. Chair, just one other item I forgot to, it's on my list here, if you don't mind, on
By all
this
means.
issue. And I think it's again from the CAO. I thought it was an interesting comment. He and I had a conversation about this. And it relates back to special purpose committees that were formed for the promotional committee. Councillor Papp reminded me of this. Really using this as a how might we, right? So a drainage committee, how might we get appropriate input from the community so that we can assist the drainage, you know what I mean? I just wonder, Mr. CAO, is it the intention that these would be rewritten that way now or in the future as solutions or possible solutions to challenges that face us?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To answer the mayor's question, yeah, that would be definitely the vision, is to rewrite the format for policy again so that they're consistent. But as you're aware, our policies follow that format, and as part of embedding the creative problem solving, we would like the terms of reference to follow that as well. So yes, that's definitely the intention.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Excellent. Anything else with respect to item 5.2? Then all in favor of the motion? And that too is carried. Before we move on to old business, there's still one other item. Councillor Durley, if you want to address your...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I received a couple of phone calls, actually, and one contained a very good suggestion. This person moved into a newer neighborhood where a few years ago there were no children. Now there are children who play on the street and around, and he is concerned that the traffic problem that we do have, the speeding problem that we do have throughout town, somebody's going to get hurt. So what he did suggest was, and it could be a very cheap way to start a traffic calming thing, make up signs and put children playing so that drivers may become aware and slow down. And I'm just wondering if staff could have a look at that, if that is a feasible solution, or just like a warning, because I've gone through enough and found it very odd that the sign would be slow children. Wondering whether children were slower, we should slow down with the children in other municipalities. So looking at something like that, it would give an awareness for for drivers to perhaps slow down a bit, and maybe at the point where most kids are playing would be the points to look at. And just if staff could look at something like that and give us something as to the feasibility of that, I would appreciate that as as perhaps a start and a very reasonable start as far as costs are concerned, to perhaps calm some traffic down a bit.
Thank you, Councillor Durley. So as I take it, the motion is to consider signs, children playing specifically, or?
Something like that, and if that's not the answer, I don't really like slow children as a sign, but something that would make a driver aware that they should be alert, because there are things that could be happening with, and I'm using children as the example.
So perhaps,
I noticed even there's a picture of a snake and a turtle drive slow because wildlife area on a road that's crossing. So little sign, a warning sign like that perhaps could just give an awareness to drivers.
so the motion, as I take it, is that that staff investigate appropriate signage for areas where children play?
Yes.
Did I capture it? You got that?
Yep, say yes.
Any further discussion? Councillor Lane?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but does that not exist somewhere already in Pelham, that there are signs out there? I know of one example in North Pelham where there's a definite sign. I'm just trying to remember the wording about that sign, you know what I mean, Al? Right there on the...
Please slow down.
And, was that put up by the town, or was that put up by a private citizen, or what? I don't know, but I think there must be some...
The CAO, I think, has a response.
There was, there's no specific policy that tells you or triggers a children playing sign to be installed. It's more on a complaint or case-by-case basis. Staff will certainly look at it. I would suggest to council that this will be addressed in the traffic management policy, where council's directed us to develop a new policy that incorporates the principles of tactical urbanism. That's exactly the type of thing that tactical urbanism is designed to address. So if there's a problem, you go out and address it. And to be quite frank, it may be accepted that slow down children area signs are effective. They really don't do anything. They simply enable the driver to drive as fast as they want. No one pays attention, quite frankly.
I feel
So
guilty
you have
about
to
it,
have
right?
physical changes to the street in order to slow the traffic, and that's the name of the game, and that's where we're working to develop a policy that will accomplish that. But we'll certainly take a look at it as per your request.
I just bring this forward because the resident had called me. He thought it might be a solution, and in fact, if you're looking, it's in the area of Wilson Crossing Tanner, is where this came from. So.
So if we pass this this motion, it's understood that it'll be examined in the wider question. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah.
Then all in favor? And that is carried. Give me something to sign soon enough?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Moving on. It is moved by Councillor King and seconded by Councillor Durley that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend that the issue summary report sanitary sewer backflow prevention incentive investigation be received for information. Comments, questions? Councillor Papp.
Mr. Chair, just help me. I read it and I'm fully in favor, I guess. What are we going to do with it? Are we looking at an incentive program with this? Maybe I misread it. I thought, good information, so what are we doing? We're just going to receive it, we're not going to do anything about it?
Mr. CEO?
That's council's prerogative if, I think
You
it
want
was
direction
to,
from us?
I think the report was sort of an overview and a research exercise. If
Right.
council wants us to proceed with the development of a program, then that's something that we would have to have your direction on.
May I comment, because it's related to Councillor Papp's question? I felt that the report might have benefited if there had been some indication within the report of why municipalities have these programs and why it's appropriate for them to do so in their particular circumstances, because without that, it's kind of difficult. It was difficult for me to understand how I could make use of just the amounts that are suggested in some municipalities for the program. So I'm wondering whether if we might take a look at that before we accept the report. I guess I want to make a motion with regard to that, but somebody else is going to have to. Comments, Councillor Papp?
Based on that comment, then I think establishing the raison d'etre for why we would establish an incentive, it may be worthwhile for us to send it back to staff to come back with that rationalization and the development of a possible appropriate protocol for putting into place a incentive program for water backflows. Does that sound reasonable? Within a period of time?
That?
So I would like,
So the motion is to develop a
send it
rationale.
back and develop the protocol and the rationalization for a backflow incentive program in the town of Pelham. Does that work?
I think everyone understands the motion. All in favor?
Well, I'd like to
I'm sorry, for comment?
Thank you very much. I think it's one of the pieces that came out of the discussion we had with some sewer backups in a certain part of the community. And from my discussion with some of the homeowners, you know, they're requesting, well, what they were told, well, you can always install a backflow preventer. Okay, well, what does that do? Well, it stops the sewage from coming into your home. Great. Well, they heard about other communities locally that had that program, and so they said, do we have a program? And I think the other is, you know, so I think it's important for us to at least consider developing a program for that. We've had the rain barrel program, we've had toilet rebate programs, et cetera. So some of these programs are very helpful, and if it's a possible solution to stop that, it's probably something we should be involved in addition to all the other work that we're doing, the investigation of stormwater getting into the sanitary sewers. I have a question, Mr. Chair, about the permit inspection fee. I was kind of looking around at different municipalities. Currently, it says here the inspection fee is $225. And I think, you know, again, through discussions with individuals, they said, you know what, somebody put in a backflow preventer, they didn't want to do the inspection. Was it done right? Because they didn't want to pay the fee. So my question for staff is, if this gets approved, I hope it does, but if this gets approved, can that also be one of the possible incentive pieces, that there's a period of time in which that inspection fee would be either significantly reduced or dropped or something like that? Because we really, if that's holding up people from doing it right, you know, we don't want to make sure that that's not the case. So just want to hear from staff on that.
Yes, yes, Mr. Chairman, that will certainly be considered as part of the discussion that we'll have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other comments or questions? Suzanne?
No, I'm
Councillor
good.
Papp? Oh, Councillor Lane? You're sitting too far away.
Yes, I can move on, change my name. I'm questioning on this, what is the benefit at the end of the day to the town if we have this, an incentive program for someone who's a homeowner, who's responsible for their own home and or whatever. What is the incentive? What is in it for the town? What are we gaining from it as a town? If I put a sump pump in my house, what is it gonna go to the town? I'm trying to understand the rationale. Why are we getting involved in everybody's day-to-day life of looking after their property?
Thank you, Councillor Lane. I think we talked about needing to have a rationale for why these municipalities
Is
do
that
it,
what
because
they're
without,
gonna be coming back to us
yeah,
with?
because without that, we don't know why,
Find out why they're doing
why
it.
they do it, so we don't know why we would do the same thing.
And I appreciate that's what's gonna happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane.
I might have been napping at that time. I don't know.
Maybe you were too far away. Thank you. Any further questions? No. So we have an amendment to look at, that the issue sheet be referred back to staff and develop a protocol for the backflow incentive program in the town of Pelham. And I think you would, or staff would understand that to mean to include a rationale and a consideration of the fee. Oh, we are updating
Sorry,
this,
that's just a minute.
including, yes, okay, fair enough. So that is the motion. All in favor? And that is carried as amended. Well, that was the amendment. I guess now we have to go to the motion, right? Right, sorry,
Yes.
my inexperience is showing through. So the motion as amended, all in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moved by Councillor Durley and seconded by Councillor King that issue summary report municipal grants policy be received, and that the Policies and Priorities Committee recommend to Council that the attached municipal grants policy be approved, and that staff be directed to advertise for a call for 3 committee members from the broader public. Discussion. Mr. Mayor.
No, Councillor Papp,
No, 30 seconds, I'm very agreeable. I think it'll be interesting to see how this all maps out. There's still some nuances that I don't want to really comment on, but it'll be part of the protocol as we go through reviewing grants. Now, the question I have is, very quick. We just then entered into an agreement with a nonprofit organization. So any nonprofit that's located in Pelham would be eligible, right? Okay, that's all I need to know. So they, in effect, could apply. Okay, good, that's all.
Mr. Mayor.
thank you very much. One of the things that's being looked for under this policy is financial statements. Are those audited financial statements or just
the
financial
case.
statements?
Perhaps the treasurer has something to offer.
With organizations such as volunteer groups and not-for-profit, you will not get
No.
audited statements. It costs them way more than the grant would ever be worth.
Right.
Charities have to do it for any type of awards through Trillium grant awards and stuff.
Perfect, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. The municipal grant report form, it says within 6 months of the completion of the event or service. Why 6 months? Could, when I think about a lottery license, it's got to be in 30 days or 45 days or whatever. Maybe we should reduce that to 3 months?
Madam Treasurer?
Sure. We can reduce it. It was at 3 months at the last meeting, and council didn't think that it was enough time. So we expanded out, just so that we could get, if there's a bigger, broader project, they had more time to see what the measurable outcomes were, and it just was still within a time frame that we could manage it nicely. But if council would like it 3 months, we could change that back.
Okay, it didn't appear to me to be onerous. Who benefited from the funding, how many people attended, describe the economic benefit, those are all pretty definable. Was the event a financial success? If not, why not? Describe how the event met your perspective, et cetera. So it just seemed that, you don't want to be getting a report now in July on something that happened in, leave it up to colleagues on whether it needs to be shorter or not. The final comment, Mr. Chair. the word citizenry, economic benefit to the citizenry of the town of Pelham, I don't like that word.
Perhaps residents?
I think residents would
We
be
usually
better.
use the word residents. I think we know what that means.
Citizens, I know that citizens vote and all that other stuff, but we're here to serve all of the residents and businesses in our community. So I'd suggest that that be changed.
I think note has been taken of that.
Sorry.
Thank you. Other
Kind of
comments?
goes back to, I guess, whatever.
I have a question, if I may. One of the provisions is that grant funding will not be awarded for ongoing operational expenses. And I was a little curious about that, because I can think of services that might be offered by volunteer organizations to the town that we would find worthwhile, but whose virtually entire budget would be for operational expenses. I think, for example, of a volunteer, I don't know, suicide hotline or something, where there is no cost for anything other than things that we would consider to be operational as opposed to capital or anything else. So why would we exclude that? Or are we, does this mean actually something else, Madam Treasurer?
Yeah, it does mean something else. It's operational expenses like, paying for the phone at the building and so forth. I mean, if they come together, put an application together and it's for a specific project, you hear the hearing place in Niagara Region, they provide a service that's an operational service, but we're funding to help them support that service. And they'll talk about the things that they need to provide that service, and which are operational costs, but they're not the operating expenditures like meals or phones or their office paper and stuff like that. So the project has to have the grant has to have some foundation to it, and they have to be able to tell us how those expenses are providing measurable outcomes at the end.
Okay, so to use my hypothetical of a hotline in which, for example, the telephone cost is central to the service they provide, that's not the operational expense. What would be the operational expense with regard to telephones in that particular instance? I mean, it's just so I can understand it.
Well, the issue is not so much, I mean, they come in with this project. What we want to make sure is that if their bottom line is saying that they've got, $15,000 in the bank and they're asking us for $2,000 because they have to support this operational activity or this activity that is an operation in nature, that becomes problematic to us because, they have a huge surplus. And why should we be funding when someone's got all the money sitting there? So that's the way we'll look at the operational side of it with respect to the committee. And making sure, we've talked about this before at the last council meeting, that, if there's lots of funding available that in their organization and they're asking us for small dollars, is that something we really want to contribute to?
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. I'm not sure I'm entirely clear. I don't think I'd be comfortable with ambiguity in this if, in fact, a service is being provided in which, again, virtually everything is an operational cost. And I know you're not going to exclude that because this is central to the service, but it is an operational cost. So I'm just wondering whether that can be wordsmithed a little bit at least so that the ambiguity is gone. I just, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just the only one who can't understand what that means.
No. Through you, we can wordsmith it. The difference is if they're applying for funding, they're going to tell us the service that they're providing. The application is very clear on what they're going to do with this and how much that project type thing costs. If they come to us and say, we'd like you to pay for, our heat expense for the year, we're going to say no to that. If that is an operational expense where they're not providing us with how that's going to benefit the community, what it's going to do for us as residents here in the town of Pelham. So the application is very clear on making sure that this is either a project-based, capital project-based, or operational project-based are fine, but it just cannot say that, we'd like you to pay, we've had some cases where they'd say, we'd like you to pay the rent to our building. No, that's an operational expense. That does not have any support with it on what service you're providing. And usually it comes in formats of project types. When we get some of these applications from the Children's Advocacy Committee and stuff like that, they'll talk about some sort of, campaign that they're doing, and this is what they're using the funding for. So you get that premise of how they're helping the children and doing their service at an operational level, but they're not asking us to pay the rent for that month for the building, so.
Okay. I think I'm comfortable that you've separated the operational expense that's central to the service from other expenses that might be incurred that would be not directly involved. So I understand that, and on that basis, I guess I'm comfortable with what's there. But I do think that there's an ambiguity there that maybe you could look at. Other comments or questions? Councillor Pat?
Go ahead, Councillor King.
Councillor King?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the treasurer. With respect to service clubs, how would they fall into a grant application, or have they provided any input into this process?
No, they have not provided input, but based on, this policy was made based for the user fee subsidy grants is what typically that they'll get funded for. We took into consideration all the types of grants they receive. For instance, one receives it for the maintenance of their ball diamond that we have access to. So that's a specific project that happens during the summer, and they're able to apply under the user fee subsidy grant for that. So we're eliminating, we're helping to support that maintenance because we actually use that premise. So the others are where they have their fees waived. So they would apply under here having their fees waived. So we just wanted to make sure that we were bringing everybody in under consistent one policy. And we will go out with this policy and reach out to them and indicate to them what they need to do to fill out the application and so forth, and make sure that they have, there's no red tape for them to come here and get this done. But we've covered off all of what the service clubs are now getting with this policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pat?
No further comment.
Other comments? Then let me call the question. All in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to need
Council Fairley, or can you use Council King? Resolution secondary.
That's right. It's moved by Councillor King that issue summary report driveway entrance permit policy be received, and that the committee recommend to council that policy S701-08 driveway entrance permit policy be approved. Comments? Mr. Mayor?
Chair, apologies to colleagues, my fine-tooth comb came out. Just in relation to the key facts, we don't want to look at this again, and we are in the process of updating our zoning bylaw. So can we just say, shall comply with the zoning bylaw, period, not the specific zoning bylaw, and then we'll have to remember when we approve it that we changed the thing, et cetera. And then the other is, I think that's pretty straightforward. And then the other is that the right word? Affect, effect. I always have a problem with this. Affect traffic flow.
Affect traffic
Affect,
flow.
Is that correct?
It's a verb
Affect.
as opposed to noun.
I guess it's negatively affect traffic flow. Anyways, thank you.
Who in staff can answer that? Mr. CO?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll delete the specific bylaw number and just refer to it as the Town of Pelham zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Questions? Calling the question. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Moved by Councillor King that issue summary report nepotism policy be received for information, and that staff be directed to ensure all human resources policies are updated accordingly. Let's find that here. Questions, comments? Mr. Mayor.
Fine-tooth comb, apologies, but I appreciate the policy or the recommendation coming forward. However, the wording that's there is, as I read it, Mr. Chair, very, very specific. And yet, we're taking a more broad brush approach as I read it. So I'm looking for clarity on this. As I read it, legal counsel is recommending that the ultimate decision with respect to hiring advancement of relative employee, da-da-da-da-da. We do not recommend that it be at the sole discretion of CEOs. That was their only problem with it, as I read it. And yet we're now throwing everything out. Is that? And I know that was a specific question. I know we spoke about it at one of our previous P&P meetings. I guess my question is, what do they recommend?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They recommend that we follow the existing legislation as they've outlined. So we have to follow the Human Rights Code that permits discrimination, and so on as they've recommended in here. So their basic recommendation after speaking with them is that nepotism policies in and of themselves are not common, and they're not recommended because they're fully covered under law with regards to what you can and can't do, and to try and create a policy that doesn't create a conflict with existing legislation can be problematic. And then the final point they made is that the ultimate decision with regards to the CAO's unfettered discretion is probably not appropriate either, because I am, like everyone else, bound to the legislative policies of the province and the federal government. So their recommendation is that we're thoroughly covered on this issue, and there's no point in trying to invent something for ourselves.
So I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, it says the Human Rights Commission has taken the position that such a denial or preference must be based on policy rather than occurring on an ad hoc basis. So they say we could do a policy. It's not required by law, but we could do a policy. And then it says the answer that was proposed about the CAO, et cetera, that was an ad hoc basis policy, right? So I guess I'd like to understand or be reminded of what the Human Rights Code says about this type of thing and what our policies say. My understanding is, maybe we'll hear that answer, Mr. Chair. What does the law say?
I'm just recalling the conversation that I've had with legal counsel. Again, my understanding is that there is areas in the Human Rights Code that talks about direct reporting relationships, for example. So you cannot have a husband and wife in a direct reporting relationship, or a mother-daughter, or what have you. So those are the types of things. Now, to recall specifically what the law says verbatim, I can't do that at this point, but that's the intent. There is provisions in the act that says, or the code rather, that says what you can and can't do.
Mr. Mayor?
Again, my read on this, it says that Section 24 of the Human Rights Code provides an exemption and permits an employer to either grant or withhold employment or advancement of employment of a person who is a spouse, child, parent, or employer or employee. So it does permit it if it's done in policy. What's being recommended here is
No policy.
that we don't create it. And yet, so I'm confused, because I thought we did do something. We did have a policy, and we said what the CEO just said in terms of a relationship. So somebody who has a spouse couldn't report to a spouse, or a child couldn't report to a parent, or whatever. Those kind of things. I'm sorry to be obtuse about this, Mr. Chair. I really am, but I don't, by my read of what's here in the CAO, unfortunately, it's not jiving in my head. So is it covered, is that the policy of the Human Rights Code? Or is it, as I read here, Mr. Chair, that we can actually have that policy and it is allowed under an exemption that's in the Human Rights Code?
Mr. CEO?
I'll try and answer the question if I understand it correctly, Mr. Chair. I believe that what the commission is saying is that if you can have a denial for employment or advancement if you have a policy, right? So yes, you can do that. So the policy could say that, we don't hire immediate relatives of existing employees. Therefore, you could make those hiring decisions based on that policy. However, that's still challengeable under the Human Rights Code. So just because you have a policy doesn't mean it can't be challenged. And so if you're going to do that, the commission is saying that you do it on policy, you can't do it on a case-by-case basis. So the recommendation, again, from our legal counsel is that what's the point of having a policy? Because A, it's already covered under the code, or B, if you put a policy in place, it's still challengeable to the Human Rights Commission as being discriminatory in the first place. So it's a bit of a dichotomy that why bother creating it?
Mr. Mayor?
Maybe Councillor Papp can.
Maybe
help
we'll
out
take,
because or somebody else, because I still, to me, does that exist here? And that's what we're trying to get away from, or the potential of it. I'm not saying it's here. I'm just saying that's what we're trying to guard ourselves against. Right?
I think I saw Councillor King before.
No, Councillor King had her. I'll wait.
Well, two things. First of all, in the background, there's a reference to a draft policy being attached here that was crafted in October, and we don't have that as a reference point. But irregardless of that, there's a perception out there when you have staff working within this building that we have nepotism. So this, I understand why there is sort of an uncomfortableness, if there's such a word, with this the way it's stated. I still believe that there needs to be perhaps not a nepotism policy because of the Human Rights Code and what is stated here. But there needs to be a policy that keeps us within the Human Rights Code. We're not discriminating on the basis of family, but we're clearly stating that family will not report to family. So, you know, as the CAO mentioned a few minutes ago, you would not have Darren's son reporting directly to him. It couldn't be a direct, yeah, you're happy about that, eh? I'll write it right now. It just couldn't be a direct report.
Thank you, Councillor King. Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what I'm hearing is that there's an issue with the hiring practice, and I'll go a step further and say perhaps it's the hiring practice of the staff's children in summer positions or other temporary positions, because I'm not aware of any other significant familial relations in the workplace. That has been also brought to my attention. To me, the remedy for that is through the hiring practice and not necessarily a nepotism policy.
Yeah.
So I have had a discussion with HR about this, and we will be reviewing the hiring practice and the way that it's done, and the way that we recruit summer staff, particularly into the organization. So if that's the intent of what council's getting at, yes, I'm addressing it through the hiring process. But again, as according to the advice of our legal counsel and my own feeling that the nepotism policy is unnecessary, and the issue that you speak of is being addressed through other means.
Councillor King? Further? You're thinking?
No, I'm.
Councillor
thank
Papp?
you.
Sure. Firstly, I concur, Mr. CEO. The nepotism policy is not necessary. There are legislative checks and balances there to ensure that we don't go outside that. But, and picking up, Councillor King, what you're saying, the hiring practice is important, not just for summer, but across the board. If a romance, forgive me, occurs, and I've been where someone meets and they marry and they're in the same department, they're moved around. There are standards of practice in the municipal world that are used that are in compliance, that they follow the legislation, but also ensure that there's not discrimination, because those things happen. As long as that policy is that balanced approach, then I think we feel comfortable with it. And it's not just, summer. I'm thinking about, we've had this discussion a while back with some other individuals that I'm familiar with, where husbands and wives are relocating. And in some cases, in a larger municipal corporation, the husband and wife were both hired. but different positions. They didn't report to each other, but the question came up, how can you hire both spouses in a corporation? Well, one brought their unique set of talents, the other one brought their unique talents, and we can't discriminate. So if they were considered the best candidates, the answer was, you offer them a position. So I think there's an answer, and number one is, we don't need the nepotism. I was very uncomfortable. I've never seen that before. However, it is implied through the understanding that we have to follow the legislative requirements, but we do need to put into place some sort of, and I think you mentioned it in the treasurer's report, you're reviewing the hiring practices. I presume that was across the board on a broader basis. Is that fair to say? I would feel more comfortable, and then with HR and our consulting group, whoever, work with them and come back with something, because I do know of other municipal corporations who have addressed this specifically on those bases, Councillor Kane, but on other areas as well. So that they're not caught in a situation where it's seen as favoritism. I'll take it even further, you know, that
Yep.
somehow you can get in. So if we can do it that way, maybe send it back and come back with something that's more reasonable, or fits that, not reasonable, but fits that format, I would be very pleased with that. Fair?
Yeah.
CEO, comment?
I think you're already doing that, aren't you, sort of, with the hiring practices? That's what I presumed when I read that, and I think, yeah. Okay,
Comments from others?
and I think that may help, Mr. Mayor, I was in the same boat. I was struggling with it when I was reading it.
And I really appreciate the conversation, because I think it's a situation of maybe we hunkered in on a solution,
Right.
and that may not be the solution to
That may
the
not be.
perceived problem or the challenge, or there might be other things there, so I appreciate that. So in essence, this will be coming back through other means. Mr. Chair, is that correct?
Mr. CEO?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr.
Under
Chairman.
subject matter with under HR, right.
That does help.
Yeah, big time.
Comments from others?
Yeah.
I have one. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lane?
Well, just to comment, I reiterate what Council Pappas, the others have said, I think it, and Darren said as well, I think it's a hiring issue, not a nepotism issue. If you hire correctly, you don't have the other problem, right? So I think that would solve it, yes.
Thank you. So let me make my comment. I am actually not comfortable with not having nepotism at least addressed within the HR policy manual. And if our position is, and I concur with the position, that we are going to be compliant with the law, and it's our hiring practices that are going to be looked at, nevertheless, somewhere in there needs to be a reference to nepotism, as we don't have any nepotism, and what we do is we follow the confines of the law, and at least a statement to that effect. And I say that because I don't think that the entire purpose of the policy manual is to guide our practices within town. I think part of the purpose is to make sure that the public knows what our policies are. And if someone is looking to see whether, in fact, what looks to them like nepotism is or is not within the policy, they might look up the word nepotism, and they ought to be able to find it, and the explanation in it ought to indicate what we've discussed here this evening. So I'm not sure I'm comfortable that the HR policy be completely devoid of the word nepotism. I think there's a reason to have it there, if only to describe how it is that we handle those issues fairly and equitably and legally. Anyway, that's my comment. I think there's a lot of value to put on having a resource for anyone in the public to find in the event that they are questioning what our practices are and why we do some of the things that we do. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that or if it makes any difference at this point, but those are my thoughts. Mr. CEO, maybe you have a comment to make with regard to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't recommend that we include that in there. I think the conversation has illustrated it's a hiring issue that seems to be the problem, and that the Human Rights Commission and the Human Rights Code covers off on concerns that any member of the public may have with regards to fair hiring practices or nepotism in the workplace.
Other comments? Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Chair, thank you. And what we're hearing from the CAO is that they're working on it. So my question is the timing.
Mr. CEO?
I'd probably report back to council in the next PNP meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's wise. So, in terms of, and I think it's not only hiring, it's also advancement. So in terms of the resolution that's before us, that we receive it, do we then change the resolution, or is it incumbent, or not incumbent, is it inherent in the resolution, the staff and director all human resource policies are updated accordingly? Is that inherent in there, that they're gonna come back to us at the next PNP meeting?
That's just, I would consider the recommendation to be appropriate for council to approve, and the direction is that I'll come back with some additionally charged stuff at the next PNP meeting.
Thank you.
So no amendment to the motion? Further discussion? All in favor? Terrific. Carried. With 6 minutes to spare, moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Pat, that this regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adjourned until the next regular committee scheduled for Tuesday, August 5th, 2014, unless sooner called by the mayor. I have more votes here than we have councillors.
Andiamo.
And that's been passed, right?
Yes, and I did say I'm gonna put back policy and priorities committee, so that's clear.
Good. Great.
Exactly.
All right.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, I'll need that.
Here, John. Give our best to Diane.
And somebody here it for the first time.
Give everybody a grant.
I think that may be the dream. Superintendent has fallen into this.
And although, it was up in last minute.
No, the application, we were thinking of the final things, and then I had to go somewhere, so I took it over.
Those are cool. So the,
No.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. Mr. Seo, I want to
Oh,
thank
but
you.
before we send it out to them, we want to make sure, right?
All your work for all the patients.
Stop recording there.
Sorry, it took so long.
Thank you.
Very rarely got her